All right. Thank you so much for the great introduction, Chad and Isaac and Gohar. It's always great to see familiar faces, so thank you all for having us. Before we begin, I'm going to, in the chat, drop some information for you all. So since we can't be with you guys in person, we still want to be able to provide you with some literature. So the first link is a way for you to sign in so we can stay in touch with you all. Sometimes, you may look on our website and not see some opportunities posted yet that you may be eligible for in the future. So if you sign in, that is a way for us to get in contact with you in the event that positions open up, or if there's freshmen or sophomores in the group, we always reach out to that list first when opportunities come up. The next two links are our brochures. So the first one covers tax and audit, and the second one is for consulting. So I encourage you to open all of the links up. You don't have to fill out the sign-in link now or read through the brochure now, but I want to make sure you all have that because it'll go away after the Zoom call is over. So I will begin with introductions. I know a lot of you guys probably already know me. We've done a lot of events. It's so great to see familiar faces. My name is Salam Solomon. I am the audit and tax partner that covers Los Angeles and Las Vegas. I have been with RSM since March, so I'm relatively new. And just like you all, I started, I had a COVID semester for my, first semester of work. So transitioning to a virtual setting was interesting, but I'm very proud to see how RSM responded. And we can talk more about that if you guys have questions about that later. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, went to the University of Georgia and came out here about a year ago. So I've really been enjoying my time with RSM. And with that, I will pass it over to Steve.
All right. Well, first of all, let me start. Can you all hear me? There you go. I just said y'all, so might give you a hint where I came from, somewhere in the South. I grew up in Virginia, and then relocated to the Southwest. Not that I did, my parents did. So anyways, so I know that, for you, depending on what year you're in college right now, you're thinking about various things as you're getting closer to a junior or a senior. It's starting to come to mind about, all right, now what am I going to do? Who am I going to interview with? Who do I want to start my career? Do I want to go into public accounting, private, so forth and so on? So there's a lot to consider. When I came out of school, or just before I came out of school, I knew I wanted to go into public accounting. I had no clue that I would stay as long as I have. I did leave public accounting for about a year and a half or so. Went to a client. It was a Fortune 1000 or Global 1000 company. They kind of got tired of me from an audit side. So they, instead of getting beat up every audit cycle, they decided to hire me to try to fix the problems that I was focused on. And then fortunately or unfortunately, as I got in there and tried to fix the problems, they were doing some things that I wasn't comfortable with, and I didn't want to go to jail. So I left and came back to public accounting, and as luck would have it, soon after I left the company, I did get a nice visit from the Department of Justice, and they wanted to talk to me. So I made the right move by leaving, and ultimately they had to settle their problems there. That's just an example. Sometimes you just got to make the right call. It may not be the easiest thing, but you just do. But that said, I've been at this now for a good 30 years. Just by way of background, I'm an audit partner. I lead our West Region healthcare practice. I would say of that 30 years, probably 26 years have been focused predominantly on healthcare and other related organizations, insurance companies. You think about anything that's healthcare related, and I've probably touched on it. I say that every time I talk to folks, and then lo and behold, another year will come by, and there'll be something that I go, wow, okay, haven't done that before. So I say it, but that's pretty close to the truth. But anyways, in those 30 years that I've been at this, I've had the good fortune, when I came out of school, it was a down economy, a challenging economy, like it could be right now. I went to the University of New Mexico. There were, I don't know, at the time it was the Big Eight. Maybe there were 4 of the Big Eight firms in Albuquerque and one that had a location in El Paso. And I was very lucky that I got a couple offers and onboarded. I can distinctly remember Arthur Andersen only hired 2 auditors and 1 tax person. And then KPMG was hiring, and E&Y was leaving the market. And maybe it was Cooper's that was there. So not too dissimilar to, the environment we're in right now. But I've certainly learned a lot over the years. I even learned it when I was in school. So many of you probably go to school and work. Well, that's a good thing. There's a network right there that you should make sure that you take advantage of, and where you develop those close contacts, stay in contact with those people. You never know when they're going to resurface, where they're going to resurface, or you might just be staying in touch and tracking along. They're watching your career, you're watching their career, and it can be very, very beneficial to you. And I'm going to give you a story. I just caught up with somebody that I worked at Arthur Andersen with, and this will be a little bit interesting how he kept in contact with a individual and where it's led to there. So I'll try to use that as an example. But when you think about it, whether it's your job, whether it's school and participating in the various associations, when you go to career events like Meet the Firm, you're constantly getting introduced to people and new people. And you really want to take advantage of that. You really want to try to keep in touch, regardless of the outcome of how things work or they don't work for you from a career perspective. Your career is really a long time. I mean, it could be a good 30, 40 or more years. We have people at the firm that it's hard for me to believe, but they've been at the firm for in excess of 40 years. That's a long time to be in one job. But they're also fairly successful, and there's reasons for it. There are some commonalities in terms of longevity in your career and being successful. Part of it is going to be technical in nature. There's no getting around that. But the other part of it is really developing your relationship with people, and that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time for that, to mature, if you will. Again, if you're somewhat of an introvert, not to say that you have to completely change, but you really want to kind of try your best to break out of your shell and be a little bit more interactive with people. Don't be bashful. Get their information. Try to develop that rapport with them, and then keep it going. I often wonder, how folks feel, and this has certainly happened to me in my career where I've lost touch with them, and then all of a sudden they resurface, or I resurface, professionally or otherwise. And then all of a sudden, you kind of come across like, oh, golly, I've kept in touch with you for 10 years, but now I've got an opportunity on the line. I need you really to help me. In other words, maybe they're showing up as the CFO somewhere, and now all of a sudden I'm coming across like, oh, well, you should give the work to me because we used to have a good relationship there. So I would treat this like, relationships, in some regards, like the money in your depository account, right? You're really going to watch that. You're going to spend it wisely. It's capital to you. Well, relationships are capital to you through the course of your career there. And even if you'd be surprised, I wouldn't just focus on people that are CPAs or accountants or, consultants or, in the tax side of the business, because again, people's careers do change. They do take on different roles, and they could become very valuable to you. And when you then start thinking about, maybe you have a relationship with somebody, and this is one thing the firm, and I don't know how many of you that are on the call participate in this, but our firm really is into LinkedIn as an example. And that tree that develops in LinkedIn is really invaluable. It surprises me when I go out to LinkedIn and I'm trying to catch up with somebody, and then I see somebody that's on their LinkedIn, and I'm like, yeah, I really want to talk to that person, but I don't know them, and get my contact to help with an introduction there. So, I could go on and on and on and on about how important building your network and maintaining that network and those relationships is. And now's the time. Actually, I would have said if you hadn't before really thought about it from that perspective, you might want to really start that at this. And it's not to say that you have to be overbearing. So perhaps you have somebody that you've got a good relationship with, you both graduate, you kind of go in different directions, touching base with them a couple times a year would be good. So, give you an example, that client that I left and had worked on from the audit side and then went over to be the VP of their reimbursement area. And then I left and went back to public accounting. One of the individuals that I worked with on that account, he was a really, really smart guy. And I really appreciated all that he did when he was at Arthur Andersen and, the difficulties we had to work through with this public company there. Well, he decided to leave. And guess where he went? He went to what is now, the equivalent of the PCOB, the SEC Enforcement Division. And so he's had a 20-year career, and I have stayed in touch with him. And you think about that and you go, wow, okay, he's in a pretty powerful position over at the SEC at this point in time. The mere fact that I just touch base with him a couple times a year, we stay in touch and whatnot, is really good. He doesn't divulge anything to me that he otherwise shouldn't, but just bouncing some things off of him is always good. And just knowing that, I have that relationship with that individual for that long, who's in that position there. So let me, maybe if it's okay, I will share that story of an individual that I just caught up with and have stayed in touch with over the years. So he too was at Arthur Andersen. I started my career really kind of focused in the banking sector, and then healthcare became a big thing in Albuquerque, and I kind of left the banking side of it. And he continued, his career on the banking side, but he then left public accounting, and he went into various roles into companies that were heavily invested in commercial real estate. And so he moved around. I think he lived in Florida and lived in Chicago and other places, worked with several different companies. But the one thing that he did is he maintained a relationship with a partner at Arthur Andersen. And when Andersen went out of business, I think in 2001, and that partner left and went to Grant Thornton, that partner moved to Phoenix. Ultimately became, he was in the fraud and abuse practice, or what, I forget the acronym that they use over there at Grant for it. But ultimately he became the office managing partner and, continued in that role for a number of years. They had more than just kind of a casual relationship. They every year went on an annual fishing expedition to northern New Mexico and stayed in touch and whatnot. Well, this individual's career changed a little bit. He went to Chicago. He was going to work for this company. He was working for it. He had anticipated that he was going to get a promotion in running a part of the company, but the individual that was in that role, who was anticipated to retire, she did not. She decided that she was going to stay in that position. So he decided, well, this probably isn't the right thing for me to do here. So he and his wife had a need to relocate back to southern New Mexico and take care of his wife's mom and help the dad take care of that. Well, as he continued this relationship with the office managing partner, Grant Thornton, well, that office managing partner became the interim CEO of Grant Thornton and is now the CEO of Grant Thornton. So as they were talking, the CEO said, you know what, I've got some projects I want to get done, and I know you would be the right person to get it done. So I want to bring you on board and have you assist me and others with getting these projects done. So that's a relationship that was formed over a 25 year period. So, when you kind of think of that story there, here's an individual that left public accounting. The other individual stayed in public accounting. By all accounts, they're both very successful. here. But by virtue of keeping that relationship, as things change for the one individual and the same for the other, and they kept that contact, here he finds himself, I don't know what age he is, he's probably in his mid-50s at this point in time, finding himself back in public accounting, but in a completely different role there. So, I think that's a good story of why, you develop those relationships, those networks, and you really take a lot of, what should I say, diligence over a long period of time to, keep those going and moving forward, and that, they're sincere in nature. It's not that, hey, I'm looking for something from you right now, but you never know when you will be looking for something with those folks. And most times people are very good and very accommodating. If you ask them a favor and you say, hey, I've got an opportunity, I know you know this person over at XYZ company, would you make an introduction there? And it's much easier to get a warm introduction than cold calling. Cold calling is really tough, when you think about it. And trust me, you'll find yourself in public accounting, in particular, and possibly in other, private sector jobs, public accounting, they'll start talking to you about growth, right about the time you're hitting manager, and maybe even before that. And, in public accounting, being able to sell is really important. And so in a way, you're starting right now to sell yourself, by developing the network and by creating those relationships, and then having those relationships as they progress in their career, hopefully helping you. So, Lynn, I will stop there for a second. That's a lot. That's maybe 18 minutes of just going and going and going. And, maybe others can, throw out some questions, and, hopefully I can be helpful in that regard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I was going to tell the students, we understand that you guys are being talked to a lot on virtual presentations and recorded sessions. So we were like, we didn't want to do another PowerPoint. We really wanted to be as interactive as possible for you all. I understand. I see the head nods. I'm glad to see that, because screen fatigue is real. Being, from a virtual setting is real. So I want to encourage you all to drop questions in the chat box, and also feel free to unmute yourself, to ask questions. Before we continue, I want to also, as we're talking about this topic today of developing those skills to apply in the professional world, of building your network, I want to also introduce our RSM ambassadors who are on the call today. And so I'll let them talk about their experience with RSM, briefly introduce themselves as well, and we'll go from there. So I'll pass it to Bula first.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bola. I don't know. I see some familiar faces. Some of you know me, some of you don't, I guess. So I'm very grateful and blessed to actually be part of this firm, not to oversell it, but because they really value their candidates. So I started with RSM. First interaction ever was I met the firm about a year ago last fall, and I was just going in for the Big Four. I was just walking in. That's my target. That's what I want to be, and I want to be in the audit. In the IT risk consulting, or the assurance, as the Big Four call it. Walked in, wasted my time. I'm sorry to say that, but I wasted my time trying to get stuck to the Big Four, and I was leaving. I'm sorry that I'm just sharing the story. I'll be really quick. I was leaving, and I met with one of my classmates. His name is Charles. I'm very sure most of you know him. So he was already part of RSM. So I stopped saying hi. He introduced me to a partner was standing there, and Casey. It was about 45 minutes left in the whole event. I would just spend the whole 45 minutes or more just talking to them, not about anything, but just natural conversation about the day and what's happening and this and that. And moving forward, I just got the call to for interview for RSM, and I applied for all this for, and I put everything into it, but I didn't see they're interested in actually listening to every individual as RSM did. So I got this call and I'm happy to be part of RSM. I did my internship. They were very, very, very connected, up to point when the pandemic hit to keep us updated, what's happening, how we transition from an actual internship to a virtual internship. They give us all the information that we needed. They pull out the best experience ever as a virtual internship to keep us interactive. We learned a lot about RSM for 2 weeks. They did amazing. Met some really, really, really cool partners, managers, directors, staff. Everybody was so cool, helpful, making me personally feel at home, making me feeling more and more I made the right choice to be with this firm. Fast forward, I got offered the opportunity, I accepted it, I'm happy about it. And then we pulled out the new cool RSM ambassador. And I was very happy and glad to be selected for that. And I'm here. If any of you have any question about RSM moving forward after this meeting, please reach me or Cherie. We can both help you out. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bula, for that. And I like during his introduction, he touched on some more skills. One, being open to networking with a variety of firms. He mentioned that he wanted to meet the firms saying, okay, I only want Big Four. But I feel like it's good to know what you want or what you're interested in. But if you close yourself off to only one type of, accounting or one area, you really are going to hinder yourself from different areas. I like how Steve talked about how he's explored different industries as well. Even in my own career of HR, I was like, oh man, there's so many different areas, but I wouldn't know what sector I liked unless I was open to venturing and asking those questions and wanting to try out different areas. So I'll pass that to Cherie. You want to do your introduction?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry. I'm one of the RSM ambassador. Well, I started at CSUN fall 2018, and I didn't really know anything about public accounting, but I had a friend from high school that also went to CSUN, and she asked me if I wanted to go to meet the firms just to put ourselves out there. So we went together without knowing which firms to go to, because we both didn't know public accounting. We didn't do our research. We were just there to network, just to see what it's about. So she knew RSM because of Beatrice. She's in tax. So she introduced me to Beatrice and also Faith, who was a former president of Accounting Association. So that's how I started recruiting with RSM. So the next semester, which is spring, I did all my research and I was going for firms that were close to where I lived, which was in Ventura County. So I was looking at firms that were that had location in Woodland Hills and everything. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to apply to them. So when I did apply to RSM, I got the SOP during the summer of 2019, I believe. And I did the SOP with Mary, which is now the president of AA. And we had so much fun doing the social events. We were doing the SOP for 2 days. And then after I did the SOP, they let us know that we were accepted to do an internship. So I accepted an internship during the winter, and we went to Chicago for a training. I met a lot of amazing people, and some of them are with RSM full-time right now. And I still talk to them once a month just to update each other about what's going on in our lives, especially now during this pandemic. We always need to check up on people. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much. So we have quite a large group in the Zoom meeting today. So we won't have time for everyone to do an introduction, but I would love for you guys to use your reaction buttons on the bottom just so we can see who's in the room. So are there any freshmen on the call? Okay, I don't see them. How about sophomores? Okay, awesome. Juniors? Okay, a lot more juniors, awesome. And what about seniors who are ready to graduate? Oh yeah, you guys clicked that button really quickly, okay. All right, who thinks they're interested in tax or knows they're interested in tax? Okay, cool. Awesome. I see some hearts. What about audit? Who's interested in audit? Okay, great. Steve's looking like yes. Awesome, awesome. Any consulting interest out there? Awesome. Okay. We have a great group, a great mix. So I want to turn it over to you all. Do we have any questions before we continue? Feel free to unmute yourselves or drop in the chat box. No questions?
I have a question about internships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Typically, how long would it, after we apply, how long would it take for us to hear back on the application process for RSM?
Yeah, I can definitely touch on that as far as like opportunities. I wanted to talk about that because I know Sherry talked about the SLP. So there's 3 different opportunities, if you will, with RSM. So we have our summer leadership program, which is for those who have at least 2 summers left in school. So I try not to say sophomores because if you're on a 5-year plan, it may be different. So if you have at least 2 summers left, you'd be looking at that. We call it Pathways at RSM. It's hosted in the summertime. All 3 of our SoCal offices host it together. This past summer, we did do it virtual. So of course we wanted to be in person, but I'm so proud of how the firm quickly transitioned to a virtual setting. We typically recruit for that in the spring, but again, definitely fill out that link that I sent you guys in the chat box so we can stay in touch. For our juniors or those who have 1 summer left, we have internship opportunities. All of those positions are posted on Handshake, and we try to get back to students within 2 weeks because it is a pretty quick turnaround as far as trying to schedule interviews and whatnot. I will say, you know, we are in a tax deadline that affects everyone. It's busy season for a lot of people, not just recruiting. So don't be discouraged there. And feel free to reach out to recruiters too that you've met during your recruiting season. You can say, hey, I just wanted to touch base about my application. But also be understanding that there are some things that affect when they can schedule interviews or schedule the next step. And then we also have a variety of full-time opportunities. Just like the internship schedule, they follow the same starts as far as in winter, which would start January, and then summer, which is either June or July, depending if you're full-time or internship. So I encourage you all to apply. I will also drop my email in the chat box. I feel like most of you guys already have this as we've done so many events together. But just for those who may not have it yet. So feel free to reach out and whatnot. Okay, other questions?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So for Steve, I just wanted to ask, you know, if there was any way that you could go back to your college years or your first few years of professional, you know, working in the professional field, what would one thing be that you could change? I think, you know, you touched on relationships a lot and building relationships in the beginning, you know, of your career. Would that be the one thing, or is there anything else that you would maybe change?
I don't know that there would be something that I would change. You know, I'll say it this way, that's kind of a little bit unfortunate, right? Because of the regulatory environment we're in, particularly after the whole Arthur Anderson, you know, meltdown back in 2000, 2001. The one thing that it did change is prior to that, right, as a CPA, I could do audit and consulting services, right? And that gives you kind of a broader skill set. I wouldn't necessarily do tax, you know, all 3 of them, but you weren't necessarily limited by that. Once, you know, the whole Anderson thing settled out, you know, basically all the firms came around and said, hey, you need to choose audit, consulting, or tax. You can't, you know, do both. So really forced you to focus and become an auditor, right, if that's what you selected, or be a consultant. But that said, you may not be able to necessarily do the work. In other words, you know, I'm an assurance and audit partner. But my clients expect that I know their business and their industry well enough that I understand the consulting services that we can provide and how we can help them. So yeah, I'm not going to get the depth of knowledge in terms of certain consulting projects that I previously would, but there's still an ability to make yourself relevant by being knowledgeable about their business and what's going on and what the services are that we offer there. So it's kind of the inverse of your question. If I could, I would certainly love to still do audit and consulting. But you know, I still find a way, like I said, to be relevant, to be knowledgeable there. But you know, sometimes unless you're actually doing the work, conceptually you understand what it's about, but you don't have necessarily a detailed picture of what that means out there. So, you know, I'll give you a good example. Right now, a hot topic in healthcare is a thing called pricing transparency. And it's a law. It's going into effect on January 1. And health systems, hospitals have to post their charges out there on the internet. So if Steve Gradle is going to go into the hospital and I'm going to have a knee replacement, I have to know what their charges are, irregardless of what the insurance company is going to pay or whatnot. Well, conceptually, I get that, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes related to that. That's just not a matter of putting up, hey, here's what the charge is, because now all your competitors are going to be able to know what your charges are. That's going to create, you know, some problems. You know, you're going to have a list that's 10,000 line items long of charges. Well, which ones do you want to adjust? So, you know, it looks okay. Well, you know what? If they put a bandage on you and you say it's going to cost $1,000, well, that's probably not going to come across very well to the public, right? There, so they have to go through and probably, for a lack of a better word, they have to go through and manipulate their charge description master. Well, okay, I get that, but how does that all work and interrelate? So, you know, that's a good example of it. You know, Bola was talking about, you know, probably IT risk assessment. Okay, I get what that is, but I don't know what all goes on behind the scenes to, you know, do that work. I can go out to the client and say, hey, you know what, we could be very helpful, you know, in helping you do, you know, kind of a HIPAA assessment or, you know, do penetration testing or whatnot. I can throw all those words out there, but I've never done it myself, so I don't know exactly what it means. So that's just it. That's just, you know, if the one thing we could find a way to allow us to do that again, that'd be great. But anymore in this world that we live in, specialization and kind of narrowing the focus is the thing that's happening. You know, it's not, you know, you have to have a broad knowledge base, but you really have to have expertise, and you're not going to be an expert in everything. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Steve, I was actually going to ask you, you know, how did you choose audit versus tax? Because when I'm on calls with students or different events, sometimes they'll ask me like, I don't know how to choose. And I'm like, well, I don't either, because I'm not an accounting student, but let me link you with both people, you know, and consulting, and I'll let them talk about it. But how did you decide?
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing, and hopefully and I'm just going to be honest, and that's what we are at RSM here, you know, and sometimes, you know, we'll share some things and you'll go, ooh, wow, okay, that's surprising to me. It was probably where I was most comfortable was on the audit side, right? That's where I'd spent most of my time, not so much on the consulting side of it. And then, you know, at the time when Anderson went under, for you folks on the call here, you may not realize this, but because of the firms came out and said you had to pick or choose, right? Then what was happening, and this happened just before, just to give you guys a little bit of history here, at Arthur Andersen, they had a couple, 2 or 3 things that happened even before, you know, the audit issues that caught up with them. Prior to that, the consulting arm of Arthur Andersen, the partners said, hey, the consulting partners, we're lining the pockets of the audit partners and we're kind of tired of doing this. And we don't want to do it anymore. Well, prior to that being brought up, both KPMG and EY spun off their consulting practices. Okay, and they got a good chunk of change for it. I want to say in the order of $11 to $15 billion. Well, Anderson, because there was this infighting going on and this divorce that, so to speak, that was in play, they ended up having an arbitrator come in and be the referee for the breakup of the audit and the consulting side of it. And how the arbitrator came up with this number, I have no idea, but he only gave $1 billion to the audit side. And after going, well, look what EY and KPMG got. So there was that was going on. So I wasn't quite sure where, public accounting was going from an audit and consulting perspective. So my comfort was in the audit side. I had more experience with that. So I just stayed on that side of it. In hindsight, I probably, would go back and say, no, I'd want to do consulting, but it would have been a risk, right? Because I was at that point in time in my career where I was a manager or senior manager, I don't remember which. Even if they would have had me, I would have really had to catch up to speed and really make myself relevant, and there would have been some risk in that. And I tend to be a little bit risk adverse. So anyways, for what it's worth on the call here, I was just on a partner call this morning, and we were talking about a lot of things like we do. And one of the things that the firm has known, but they're really getting some energy behind it right now, is they understand how big of an opportunity consulting is in the West, particularly in Southern California. Here, it is huge. And we've had some success even under, the COVID with landing some pretty large projects here recently. So I think it's gotten the attention of a lot of folks. And now there's a lot of focus on saying, hey, we really want to expand this thing called consulting here. So there's a lot of opportunity. Likewise, on the audit side, we're getting a lot of opportunities for various reasons there. And so, the firm has changed a lot over the last 5 years, for sure. And those that are on the call or that want to be associated with tax, well, our tax department has been knocking it out of the park for the last 2 years. Us audit and consulting folks are like, oh, we got a lot of work to do to catch up to tax folks, because they've been doing really, really well for the last couple of years, in part due to all the tax law changes that came about there. So anyways, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you for that, because I get that question a lot, and I'm like, I really don't know how to answer. So other questions that come to mind, I didn't see any, I don't think I saw any in the chat box. Do we have anybody else has any questions?
Yeah, I got a question for Steve. One of the things I've researched for Big Four audit, versus like more mid-tier, is that in Big Four, a lot of time you might get stuck on one big client and be more specialized, versus where you mid-tiers may be more, do a broader scope of the audit practice. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that, or kind of speak to the differences.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Look, you'll never find me putting down the Big Four. I came out of the Big Eight, which then consolidated to the Big Four, and I spent a number of years in that environment there. Fortunately for me, I got to serve a lot of large clients, be on a lot of large pursuits and whatnot. The interesting thing about the Big Four, you are typically dealing with some sophisticated clients. They've got the systems in place, they've got the people, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the controls in place, okay? And that's all great from an audit perspective and a risk perspective. At RSM, even when I came over, there was, a part of the industry, let's just say healthcare and other related stuff, that I hadn't spent any time in before coming over to RSM. And boy, was it an eye opener. And I can share, I have other people share this with you as well that came out of the Big Four. When you get into serving the middle market, private equity, companies. So if you know what private equity is, and they've got all this money to invest, and they go out and they buy these middle market companies, and they can be a variety of healthcare type of companies. Well, guess what? They typically don't have a big finance shop. They don't have a lot of internal controls in place, policies, and they need a lot of help there. So you learn a lot fast, and you get exposed to a lot, in serving those clients there. And so if you're a staff, within a couple of years, let's say you make senior, guess what? You're out working on that client. The manager's not there every day, the partner's not there every day, and you're oftentimes interacting either with the controller or the CFO, and getting exposure to a lot of technical issues that you wouldn't necessarily get exposed to on a bigger, more sophisticated client. Just by necessity, you have to get involved and you have to learn, and they tend to be challenging. Even in this day and age, you know, with the whole everything that's gone on in the public accounting side, you just assume, hey, clients are in pretty good shape from a bookkeeping perspective. That is not the case. I can give you an example. We just wrapped up an audit from 2018, consolidated audit, just issued it a week or so ago. Okay, we estimated the hours on that were going to be 3,000 hours or so to complete the audit. We're at like 4,700 hours. And it's just because when we got in there, there's just a lot of issues and problems. And, you know, the finance team that they had in place, and they had an auditor, you know, somehow they got through the audit and issued the audit, but we had a different perspective on how things need to get handled. And then, you know, just give you one more example of it. We started looking at their compliance certificate for their debt compliance, right? Financial covenants there. And they were doing an add back on it. And we said, well, what is this? And they kind of described it to us. And we were like, well, let me look at the credit agreement. Well, the credit agreement limited it to $1 million add back, and they had 4 million in there. And we said, hey, we don't know what you all have in here, but you got to get the bank on the line, and they have to know what the details are, and they're going to have to give an exemption to it. Well, guess what? That started a whole process where the bank was not going to waive their covenant violation, and they still don't have new covenants. So we just had to issue a going concern and said, hey, the bank could call the debt at any point in time, and you may or may not be able to find a new lender there. So again, you know, you just get exposed to a lot there. So that's how I would sum it up. And not to say a Big Four experience wouldn't be invaluable. It is. But I would tell you, you can move both ways. And I'm not encouraging. Obviously, if you come to RSM, we want you to stay. But they also know the value of the RSM employees, and they have hired our employees away, and vice versa. We've done the same thing. So when you think of RSM, we've got the same structure in place that the Big Four does, okay? Just not on the same scale as they do. And we're not going to be auditing Fortune 500 companies, just like everybody except the Big Four audit. I think there may be 1 or 2 Fortune 500 companies that aren't audited by the Big Four. So, you know, anyways, that's how I would sum it up.
Thank you.
And I think, Steve, that adds to your point about, you know, maintaining those relationships, because we do have associates who go from Big Four to our, you know, middle tier, or even vice versa. We've had professionals on these events who have made one, you know, transition, and they've stayed in contact with the same recruiters that they stayed in touch with. Even the recruiting side, it's a very small world. You're going to see the same faces at Meet the Firms year to year. For the most part, we tend to stay in the same industry, or we may rotate to another firm. You never know. So those relationships start early. So I'm glad that you mentioned that for sure.
Yeah, let me just give another example. So we just hired a boomerang back. Just started last week, I think, on the 8th. So he was with RSM, left and went to work for EY, worked in the EY's healthcare practice for 3 years, and then he decided to make a move out of public accounting, okay? And so he went to a hospital system in the Valley, in the San Fernando Valley here. And unfortunately, the timing wasn't good, because he left and all COVID hit, and the hospitals were getting killed because they couldn't do elective surgery. So they had to go through and RIFT folks. And he unfortunately was one of those people that was RIFT. And we had a job posting out there for a healthcare manager, and he got back in touch with us. And, you know, we did our diligence. I didn't work with him before, and we decided to bring him back on. So again, you know, we're not going to hold any grudges if you decide, hey, I need another senior, you know, and we're going to go somewhere else there. That's an example of maintaining your relationship. You know, if you leave on good terms, you know, go do what you're going to do. And then, you know, you never know. A need may come up and you'd be welcome back, or you're looking for, you know, me as a reference. So because you want to go outside public accounting and go work in the private sector, and you go, yeah, okay, no problem. there. So that's the other aspect of it. You know, you want those references. You need to keep them for a long time. You never know when you might need to lean on somebody, not because of something you did, just facts and circumstances like this COVID thing. You know, economy was going great. There was no problems. Nobody would have ever expected that they might move on, and then all of a sudden, you know, the company's got to do what it's got to do, you know, to match cost and revenue.
That's a really great story. That's awesome to mention. I like that you called him a boomerang. That's a good term. Do we have any other questions? We're gonna just leave it to open Q&A because we wanted you guys to have an opportunity to ask whatever questions you have for either me, Steve, Bula, Sherry, whomever it may be.
All right. Well, nobody's taking me serious on the networking. I'm not hearing any networking here. So why are you? Show yourself.
Okay, I got a question. I'll go.
Yeah.
My question is, typically, our school, you know, we're pushed into the two directions of tax and audit, and not very many firms, you know, are talking about consulting as much as you guys. And so I guess I'm just asking, how do you like jumpstart your career into consulting with having education geared towards more audit or tax, and like what is consulting, you know, really about?
You want me to go with that?
I'll touch on it and then I'll pass it to you.
Okay.
So Chad, I like that you mentioned that you said, you know, sometimes schools can push you in one direction or another. And that tends to happen. We've heard that from students. Like, my professors keep telling me this. And I say this to say I definitely respect professors, but be mindful that industry is changing, and so they may not be aware of the new changes. Consulting is very high. It is the latest. I remember when I was in college, which wasn't too long ago, but yes, I'm a little older. Consulting wasn't really that big of a deal. It was just like, oh, what is this new thing? But people really weren't talking about it. Now, like Steve mentioned, there's such a push for it, such a need for it. So I'm glad that you're opening your eyes to it. I will say, as far as to get started, there are the same requirements as far as like being CPA eligible or having a specific major. But from the consulting recruiter, we have heard that it definitely makes yourself marketable to have that CPA eligibility under your belt. And if the firm is going to pay for you to do those exams, why not? Because you may transition your career in the future. And also being open to transitioning later on in life. You never know. We've had people in the firm that started in audit or started in tax, and we call it RSM owning your future. So being courageous to ask those conversations with your career advisor or your direct supervisor, wanting to maybe shadow a different line of business, learning about that, and they've made that transition into a different sector, or is in a different line of business. So I can't really tell you exactly what consulting is like because there's so many different areas. That brochure I sent you, and I'm still learning them. That brochure I sent you all in the chat box, if you go about halfway down the brochure, it talks about all the different areas from transaction advisory to cyber. And Bula maybe can answer this because he's actually going to consulting, but there's just so many areas of it. So, and I think that's what makes it really interesting to students. Bula, you want to touch on, maybe what your experience has been?
Yes. So I will tell you, so the two that I got exposed to during my internship, there's an IT aspect of piece of consulting where we do a lot of testing. We also do part of the audit to the system. So do like SOX compliance, make sure that the system is doing what it's supposed to do. And there is a business consulting part, which you make sure the controls in place. The business process is going the right. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but the little bit I learned about it is just focusing on the business. So as in accounting, because I took accounting classes, if I was in an accounting major, not IS, I'll for sure do the business process consulting versus the IT. But RSM is great, as Salam mentioned. You can, if you're interested in something, you have your career advisor from day one you start. So the first day you start with RSM, you have your own career advisor. We can go back to asking a question, some what you really love to do, and they're all about making you happy at work, which is that what you really want to do?
Thank you
Awesome. Thank
both
you,
so much.
Yeah, Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
about
I
the
can
consulting?
add a little bit more to it. And I think it's been touched on a little bit here. You know, you got to look at this a couple different ways. Okay, one, if you're going to school and you're really got that audit focus to it, don't think for a minute that that won't enable you to get into consulting. So an example, let's say you come in and you're on the audit side, and you know, you work on one of my engagements and you say, okay, yeah, I like healthcare. Okay, and this has happened. You go, okay, after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever the case is, you know, I want to do something different. Well, guess what? In our TAS group, we have people that specialize in healthcare. So that's transaction advisory. That's where you're going in and looking at the numbers different than from an audit perspective. You're either doing sell side or buy side due diligence there. Well, you know, they like the fact that you know something about the industry and you have a good, you know, sense of the numbers and how the industry operates. So you can transfer in there. Let's say you, same scenario, you come in and you do a bunch of audit work. Well, right now, one thing that we're really focused on as a firm is really building out our capabilities on internal audit outsourcing for healthcare. We already do it for a lot of other industries. We just haven't gotten there on the healthcare side. Well, let's say you go into that after a period of time in the audit side. Well, that is more, a little bit more like consulting. It's audit, but you're going to get exposure to things that are more consulting in nature than they are audit. And oftentimes when you do that internal audit outsourcing, it leads to consulting projects. Now, if you're going to move to the IT side of it, I think it was shared that, yeah, you probably need to get some classes under your belt to make yourself relevant, right? To even, you know, come in and after a period of time, or come in directly and say, hey, you know what, I want to get into, you know, risk and advisory and the IT consulting side of it here. But again, you know, probably want to just map out your career and don't do it, you know, 10 years out. You know, say, okay, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, here's what I'm looking to do. Make it manageable. And it's not a sprint. You know, it's a marathon. There, think of it from a kind of a longer perspective, but with goals that are shorter in nature that can be manageable.
Kind of piggybacking off of my initial question and the answers I've gotten, is one of the goals of business consulting to prevent the company that you're consulting from getting a bad rating, like for if they were to have an audit? Is that one of your goals, is to like protect them from that aspect?
Well, it all depends, right? I mean, when you're talking about a public company, right? And the SOX work that they do. Well, yeah, you're trying to keep that company out of hot water with the regulators, right? Because if they have material weakness findings as a result of the SOX work that's done, particularly if we're coming in and helping the company out, and then their auditor comes out and audits and finds all these problems, that's not a good scenario, right? Because eventually all that's going to be available to the PCAOB and potentially, you know, the SEC. So there's a lot at risk from that standpoint. Private sector is a little bit different. You know, on the business consulting side, it could be for any number of reasons that they, you know, want that to happen. But again, you know, one of the things that if you have a creditor out there and you're the auditor and I come out and audit and I find all these problems with your internal controls and I issue a material weakness letter on your internal controls, guess what? That creditor gets that document, right? And they might not like to see that there. So, you know, the good thing, if you have to be AICPA independent versus SEC independent, we can help the clients typically with you know, resolving those problems. You know, that's where the consulting folks or others can come in and say, all right, we're going to help you, you know, with your policies. We're out at a large health system here right now, and they had a fraud that happened on their bank system. So they decided to bring us in and look at all their policies and processes and whatnot. So there's a business consulting aspect of it. We've got somebody in the consulting group, risk and advisory, who's got a healthcare background, you know, on and on and on. So there, right, they've got a sophisticated board. Imagine you got to go tell your board, hey, we just got ripped off for millions of dollars and we didn't see it coming, right? They're not going to understand that.
Okay, I want to be mindful of time. So we had a question that dropped in the chat box from Dixon Chan. How does one go about maintaining relationships? I often have trouble starting a conversation topic that person could be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
You want to answer that, Steve?
Yeah, you know, I think it was said earlier, well, I think you said it. Don't always think you have to go into that conversation being businesslike or technical in nature, you know. Honestly, for me, if I'm at Meet the Firms, I'm not all that interested per se in talking about, you know, technical things. I'm willing to answer questions, but really what people are trying to do is get to know who you are as a person. What, you know, makes you tick on a daily basis. You know, I'm not sitting here day in and day out thinking about debits and credits. You know, that I'm definitely not doing here. But, you know, it's just, who are you? And, you know, everybody's different and different things motivate different people, right? And, you know, I'll get on the phone call with, you know, my team or others that are, I'm just getting to know, and I'm trying to make it as casual as possible, you know, there. So, you know, if that makes it easier for you, but I appreciate the fact that you're bringing it up. You recognize it's something that you got to work on it. Don't avoid it, and take it head on, and just realize it's going to take time. Again, it's not, you know, a sprint, it's a marathon. And every day, you know, the more you practice, and none of you guys probably on this call here are going to know this individual, but there used to be a basketball player in the NBA. His name was Allen Iverson. And somebody called him out about his practice or lack thereof. And his comment was, practice? Who needs practice? You know, he's a really good basketball player. Well, maybe you don't, but a lot of people do. So that's what it's all about. That's what networking's all about. You know, and you'll find people that have been at this business for 30 years that still struggle with networking and avoid it. It just happens. Celine, let me, one pitch here that I want to, you know, put out to the group. So for you auditors and tax people, I say this every time I get on a Zoom call, okay? The biggest thing you can be thinking about is how you're going to get that CPA exam done before you start your professional career or very soon afterwards. So if that's not on your radar screen, that's the biggest thing you can do. And I can tell you, honestly, when I'm looking at folks that are looking to come in and maybe have graduated and they're looking at a job, I'm saying, okay, what have you done for the last 6 months? Do you have any of the parts of the exam done? Do you have the whole thing? I'll tell you what, it's pretty impressive to me when I sit there and I'm looking at somebody that, for whatever reason, they didn't go through the recruiting process, they've relocated, whatever, but they've just graduated from school and within 6 months they got the exam done. That's pretty telling, you know, who that individual is. So put that high on your priority list as soon as you can start taking it. And if you don't have to start right away and you can take several months to try to pass it, do it.
Agreed. I don't have an accounting background, but that's literally the main thing I hear from professionals is get that out of the way, for sure. And as you go through your recruiting process, that is a question you can ask the recruiter from the variety of firms. It's what incentives does the firm provide, or does your firm provide for students as we're graduating? I'll say for RSM, as soon as a candidate accepts a full-time offer with us, we provide them access to Becker study materials that's paid for by the firm. There's also a bonus structure based on how quickly you finish all 4 parts. You get paid out, I forget the exact amount, and it can change. So, but that'll be provided to a student with their offer letter as well. So kind of an incentive for you to get those done. We also have a sabbatical program where we've had some professionals in their first year maybe take some time off because they want to study for, maybe they have that one left and it's just too difficult for them to try to do work and study. So then maybe they'll take some time off to get that done. So it's kind of like extended paid time off. I don't know if it's exactly PTO, but there's a structure for it there. So that's a great question to ask the recruiters while you're on campus, virtual, whatever it may be, that, you know, you want to know that as you're going into recruiting season. So. I want to be mindful of your guys' time, but I want to say thank you all for having us. It's always a pleasure to talk to CSUN students. So thank you all for having us. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, and we hope to see you guys at future events through the semester.